Hello, I'm William Gallagher. This is 58 Keys, and 58 Keys is always for writers like you and me who use Macs and iPhones and iPads. It's an excuse, frankly, for you and me to talk about these great tools and, thereby avoid doing any actual writing. Except today is different. Today is a completely different excuse. If you are watching this as it first come out, then it's Christmas week 2020, and you and I are getting to sit down with writers from television, theatre, software development, and non-fiction. If you're watching it later, then bonus. All 5 interviews are in a playlist on the 58 Keys channel, just waiting for you. I have relished doing these, so do subscribe to make sure you see them all. But I said this edition is a different excuse. There are Macs involved. This writer does use one, and we do talk about Mac apps, but really this is all just a chance for me to introduce you to a writer who is responsible for me becoming a writer at all. April Smith has this amazing career with best-selling novels, countless television shows, ranging from Cagney and Lacey to Mrs. America, but she started out on Lou Grant. That show was the first where I realised that television wasn't just this thing that goes on in the corner of the living room. It was something that is made, crafted, worked on, and which is capable of changing me. It's not often you can blame a whole team of writers for your career, but I can, and now you and I get to meet one of them, April Smith.
So many reasons for wanting to talk to you. One of which, of course, is that you're a Mac user. Clearly, that's the whole point of the series. But actually, I really find that using a Mac and talking about Macs and all the things you can talk about writing are the best way to stop you actually writing. So it's time to buckle down and ask some real writing questions. And that's why I particularly wanted you, because you have this, this amazing history in writing, but right now you are split between novels and television, and I'm fascinated by how similar they are and how different. I imagine, it's got to be different writing muscles.
Very different writing muscles. You can, of course, do both on a Mac because the programs are fabulous, and so I rely on that stability, supposedly, with technology. Of course, you have to have a script writing program. I use Final Draft for that, and then I use Pages for prose. There's so many differences in terms of the writing muscle. First of all, the rhythm of a script is so much different from a novel. The rhythm of a script is, of course, due to dialogue and breaking up the story into scenes and shots and availability of actors and all that sort of thing. Prose, you're trying to do just the opposite. You're trying to create a smooth, unbroken voice that takes the reader all kinds of places that you can't go on the screen, for example, in the character's mind. So one of the biggest differences is voice. And as an author, sometimes it takes you a while to find it. Sometimes my first novel, North of Montana, was written first person present tense from the point of view of a biracial female FBI agent. And so much of the reader's experience in reading that had to depend on the validity and authority of that voice and the believability that you were really listening to Anna Gray. Of course, in a script, I would call it more like style, that allows room for the actor to bring in the characterization that you suggest on the page. But both of them depend fundamentally on structure, especially scripts, because they have to be broken down into shootable segments, right? And reorganized that way. And they have to play a certain way. And certainly when I was writing network television, which doesn't exist anymore, you had to write a four-act scenario. And as you know from Lou Grant, that those 4 acts were very disciplined. And that's really where I learned about structure in general. just to switch to Lou Grant for a minute. At that time, running an hour of TV, you had 4 acts, that is 4 commercial breaks. And so you had to create momentum and climax within each one of those acts, and then have a cliffhanger, to put it simply. And so sitting in, that was where I started out. And it was a great education because Gene Reynolds and Seth Freeman and Alan Burns were pros. They'd all done this before. Gene, of course, created MASH. And so we sat with a whiteboard, the whole staff, about 6 of us in the room. And we went, beat by beat to each act. And I still do that. I have a whiteboard in my office, talk to myself, which is slightly bizarre, but I still do that. For some reason, I don't know, I think most writers have the need to sort of flip into different modes. Sometimes you're reaching for index cards, sometimes you're reaching for the whiteboard, to see what you're doing from different angles. I suppose if you were a sculptor, you'd be making little models. So it's a process that keeps repeating itself, in different modes until you have something that relatively makes sense and builds in the right places. So structurally, there are similarities. Of course, in the actual product, they're very different because a novel is, as I said, a seamless, 350 pages of prose, and then the script is more of a blueprint for other people to make the final product. So clearly, as an author, you have more control. You have more. It's a personal expression, not. You don't have the accommodations of the groupthink. On the other hand, the groupthink, if you're in a room with really smart people, can be really exhilarating. My latest TV gig was, I was a consulting producer on Mrs. America, the FX Hulu miniseries about Phyllis Schlafly and the ERA. And I was really lucky to be in a room that was very diverse and really smart people. And these people have basically go from show to show as staff writers. They do their own work, but that's sort of their daily bread. And the blushing of the minds in that room is exhilarating when it works, and then it can be crushing when it doesn't. Does that at all get you where we want to go?
Oh, that's amazing. So I could list, my mind went off in 5 different directions, one of which is Mrs. America is played here on the BBC, and it is so tense. It's just utterly riveting. And I'm quite amused by the fact that it's about the Equal Rights Amendment, because I, as a British person, I know the American Constitution no better than some of your politicians, really. But I'd only ever heard of the ERA in Mrs. America, in the West Wing, I think, once, and originally back in Lou Grant. But Lou Grant, when I watched Lou Grant here in the UK, we used to have far fewer commercial breaks than you did. For any show, there might be 2 at one point. So I actually came to believe that it was a dramatic construction that an episode would fade to black and then fade up again immediately afterwards in exactly the same spots. It's very peculiar stuff.
Just
5 different ways. When you said about the script being a blueprint for it, how about the fact that some of your novels have been made into television and films? In fact, you've written them. How hard was that to split your mind and go a different route on the same story?
No, it was easy because by then it was just craft. Because the book you're talking about, Good Morning Killer,
yeah, which
is the second book in the Anna Gray series, and it was made into a TV movie now available on the web by TNT. And the good part about that situation was it was a rush job because TNT had broadcast basketball. There was a basketball strike, and they needed content really fast. So there was an accelerated schedule of, I think they did 6 mystery movies on a wheel. And so And so my book was one of them. So it was really fast, but luckily everything had been worked out in the novel. I didn't have to figure out the story. All I had to do was, put it through the script machine and break it up into actable scenes. So it was exhilarating too, and it was fast, and it was really fun. We shot it in Vancouver, which is, a great movie town.
Did you
So
charge them
it was,
extra for having to write quickly?
yeah, I should have. No, it was wonderful. I was finally an executive producer, totally, I don't want to say in charge of, but totally immersed in the material. So it was a straight ahead shot.
One thing, so I noticed, I remember being very upset when Lou Grant was cancelled after 5 years. And I understood reading somewhere that you were going to be a producer or an executive producer in the next run. And instead you became that on Cagney and Lacey, I think, which replaced it. Is that right?
Lou Grant was canceled, and then I was floating around, and they asked me to come on as a producer, which I jumped for because I wanted to be a producer. But there was nothing. There was no staff. There were no typewriters. There were no scripts. And it was like June, and we had to be in production by September. So I had to hire staff. I had to, actually, they got the equipment, thank you. But we had to start generating scripts to be shot in September with a new actress and a whole new set and the whole thing. And one of the, most talented people I was lucky to hire was Robert Crace, who, as you know now, is a huge author of mystery thrillers. And he had come off Hill Street. So we had a good team going in. And so, we put that show on the air, and then it got picked up, and then we all left. We did not get along with the executive producer, and we were arrogant, and my agent said, you can do whatever you want. But honestly, it was the worst mistake in my career to leave.
Oh,
Here's a clue. Never leave a hit show. Put that on the bottom of it. I was able to make some transitions there and get into TV movies, long form, at ABC Circle Films.
British American television, the difference is, I think they're both capable of making incredible things and duds. But in the American process, it's much more common for writers to become far more involved in the production than they ever are here. Sometimes here it feels like we're hired like stationery and then put out again afterwards. I think that's good that you get involved. I think that the writer should be an important voice. I think drama is collaboration. But then if you have a horror story like that, don't you just want to run away to the keyboard forever?
Well, right. Yes, and that is the refuge of writing novels. Again, you don't have to answer to anybody except your own demons. So I've been lucky to go back and forth. It's really been
unusual. Yeah.
Yeah.
I talked to you because I thought they were so different, but the more I look into it, the more it's certainly for your novels, you're repeatedly renowned for the historical accurate in the research in them. Grant, of course, was heavily researched and things, but in both cases, it's your story in the end. Isn't there a point when you have to get the research and make it up?
Mm-hmm. Yes, you do.
Know when that is?
Yes, you do. Well, for me, my sort of compulsive way of working is to really get involved in the research, and actually for my books, actually go there. For each book, I wrote a book called Be the One, about the only woman baseball scout in the major leagues. And I lived with the Dodger organization for a while. They were very kind. And I actually went to the Dominican Republic, and I breathed the air, and I went to their training camp, and I hung out at the stadium during winter ball. I went to the Florida facility. I actually went there. And I do that with all my books. I have to absorb the atmosphere and be the character, and from the character's point of view. So I have this this process of being very heavily immersed in the research. And as you say, then you have to back away and tell the story. And the research sometimes helps you as a little bit of a starting point, or a boundary. Like, you can't really do that because that wouldn't really happen. So I think it's structurally helpful too. But then, as you say, you have to let go of that and go into another part of your emotional being, which is associative, purely creative, purely associative, from what this character says to how that character responds to where they move and how they, connect or don't connect. And so there's different muscles or parts of your being that you evoke at different parts in the process. And I think, it's arduous. Either way, it's arduous. It's physically hard to sit there and build the structure. You don't see it. You can see it more like in a painter or a sculptor, but you see people typing and it seems kind of bland. But it's really hard.
I don't want to make it sound like there's a Mac tool for everything, but it does occur to me that there are quite famous Mac apps that are built for quite complicated research. Have you heard of a thing called Think, for example?
No, what is that?
It's like a database where you just chuck in everything you find, but as you do it, it starts making connections. So you look up something and it has in some intelligent way recognized that there is a connection with this other photograph you found last year or something. Apparently quite hard to get into, but then people will never leave it once they're in there. Do you have a process for actually collating researchers? Is that a word? Okay.
Yeah, well. Facts. No, but I want to get that now. I'd sort of do that. I do, like I say, with index cards or boards, or, I have file folders that are sorted by subject, So no, I'm doing it the old-fashioned way, but I'm going to switch.
On paper. Oh, well, that's it. We're stopping now. I'll send you a link to Think. Okay.
Thank you.
Obvious last question.
Sure.
Where are you gonna? Do you know what the next book or the next show is? Can you set a book here in the UK and come over?
Oh, I would love to. I studied for a semester at the University of London. I just love England.
All right.
Yes. Yes, I'm deeply into the next novel. After doing the mysteries, I started writing suspenseful historical fiction, talk about research. So there was one that the latest one is called Home Sweet Home, takes place in South Dakota, and it's based on a true incident. That's another thing I should say, is a lot of my work is inspired by true incidents. For example, Home Sweet Home, A Star for Mrs. Blake, which is about the Gold Star Mothers' pilgrimages during after World War I from America to Europe to see the graves of their sons. That's historical fiction based on fact. In the 30s, the US government paid for women who had lost their loved ones in World War I and were buried overseas in France to make that journey by first-class ocean liner and then by first-class tours, climaxing in these diverse women from the United States standing in front of the graves of their sons 13 years after the war. Okay, that's a story. So I did that. I went to all the places that the Gold Star Mothers went to because it's all saved in the U.S. government files on little tissue paper written in hand, the itineraries, and they had to make reports about these women every day, if their bowel movements and their headaches. I mean, it's quite a thing. So I started with that and created characters. And then Home Sweet Home, the latest one. So a family was found brutally murdered in their home in the Seattle area. And it was traced back to the previous generation of that family who had settled in the Pacific Northwest to start a new life. And that family, one was a lawyer and one was, a nurse. And those people were falsely accused of being communists in this little town in, I put it in North Dakota. So from that situation, which was famously reported, in the next generation, the same ghosts followed them. And the second generation, the son of those people, his family, were perceived as being communists, and they were killed. So that was what I started with. And again, the research, the newspaper articles, it was widely covered. But from that, I fictionalized it, changed the characters, changed the location, and so forth. So in this sort of process, starting with a real story and real conflict that exists is really helpful, because it gives you the parameters and it gives you the drama. So my latest book takes place in New York in 1927, and it's wide-reaching, but again, it is based on fact about women whose husbands were deserting them during that period of time. And I'm in the middle of that right now. And as far as TV goes, to make a long story short, we're kind of shut down in Hollywood right now because of the WGA action against agents. So right now it's like free fall. And I do not have another TV gig lined up, nor do I have an agent right now. So that's why I can go into books.
Right. So we need to fix the business with the agents, get rid of the coronavirus, get you an agent back, get you to the UK and have you write a comedy, I think. Does that sound like a plan?
I think we could collaborate, and it would be great.
There you go. Exactly.
Yeah.
April Smith, I've said this. I'll say this to anybody who listens. You are one of the reasons I am a writer at all. I deeply love your work. So it's a treat to get to speak to you. Thank you very much for this.
Thank you for the privilege of speaking with you, and to all the wonderful British writers out there who do such a great job. My favorite shows are always British thrillers.
As this first comes out in December 2020, Mrs. America is available to watch on the BBC iPlayer here in the UK and on Hulu in the US. I'll put links to April Smith's books in the show notes too, but you can also check out her own site, aprilsmith.net, for more details of all of her work. April Smith, one of my writing heroes, and I got to talk to her because of you. Thank you for that. Thank you for watching too. Do subscribe to see who's next in this special 58 Keys interview series, and take care of yourself, eh? I'll see you soon.